like to do, Limon Rodriguez has been collecting all of your rapporteur notes and has consolidated them all from yesterday and this morning. And he has a draft of the recommendations, so we'd like Limon to present to you, and then you'll have time at your tables to discuss and select the two priority recommendations that will be presented to the plenary tomorrow, to the whole conference. And then all the recommendations will be going to the UN and to the member states. So Limon, if you could kindly share that with us. And everyone, this is a draft. It's for you to discuss and decide. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I sought to identify a set of recommendations emerging from the presentations and small group reporting from our workshop on innovation and e-governance for sustainable development. I'd like to flag two things. A, so these are draft recommendations. So it's possible that in your small group discussions, you will do some mix and match and modify them as you see fit. Then the second point I want to make is recommendations are not mutually exclusive. In other words, one recommendation can overlap with another. So let me start with the first recommendation. Sharing common vision and values. So a point highlighted by Rob, and keeping in mind the needs of both current and future generations, a good point raised by our colleague Noor. Governments in collaboration with other key stakeholders, including among others, civil society and citizens, should engage in short, medium, and long-term planning. In other words, integrated planning on public services with reporting, monitoring, and evaluation mechanisms. Second, this is very important. Political will, buy-in from political leadership at all levels, multi-stakeholder participation, which was highlighted in the Gauteng Education Project, corruption control, and it's good to know the recent research by Mr. Lee, which found that e-government has strong positive impact on good governance and sustainable development, institutionalization of reforms, and process improvement, as well as presence of legal and risk management frameworks. It's good to know something about this legal framework from the experience or from the sharing by our colleague from Turkey, who mentioned that legal framework may be necessary, but not sufficient. That's why he included other stakeholders, such as schools, families, and local authorities. And risk management frameworks. I'm glad that our colleague, Guran, alluded to this point with regard to the case of the Balkans. Central coordinating body, mandate-based implementing agencies, local champions, and feedback mechanisms will facilitate and enhance implementation of e-governance. Third point, building ICT infrastructure, especially for countries in the early stages of their e-government journey, and connectivity, a point which forms part of the special set of challenges that small island developing states face, and keep ICT systems simple for countries probably in the advanced stage of their e-government journey. For instance, the case of the European Union countries, and I think it's also applicable to other countries which may be in different levels or stages of their e-government journey, to keep the ICT system simple to users, including through a single phone number to access public services, as in the case of Bahrain's National Contact Center, and well-designed and cost-effective search engine on public services. The gov.uk is a case in point, citizen-centric information systems, and integrated e-service shops. Next slide, please. Fourth, another recommendation that emerged from the presentations and small group reporting is the development of human resource capacity of public sector, including through exposure to frontline public service delivery. I remember the example shared by a colleague from Bangladesh about innovation training, whereby public servants are fielded or are assigned to another office which is doing customer-facing work, which gives them perspective on how to better deliver public services. Trainings and recruitment of talent in a transparent and effective way. It was shared to us by our colleague from Uruguay in its Compites program. Fifth, this is important, which probably it's up to you, my fellow colleagues, with regard to identifying the two most important recommendations which will feed into the set of recommendations which will be read, which will be put forward at the plenary tomorrow. To talk about collaborative governance and leadership. So the point here is we promote collaborative governance, including through combination of top-down and bottom-up approaches, coordination between political leadership and bureaucracy, and between and among government agencies, public-private partnerships, and international and regional cooperation, including with international development partners, as in the case of our small island development states, with an incentive structure in place. I'm glad that this piece was mentioned in one of the small group reporting, as incentive structure helps to encourage, motivate individuals to carry out such good practice. 6, bridge digital divide among the poor and vulnerable, such as women, people in rural areas, and elderly through awareness campaigns, literacy programs, one-stop service centers, multi-channel service delivery, gamification, and multilingual mobile platforms. Next slide, please. 7, social media, gamification, crowdsourcing, and blogs can be powerful tools to educate citizens about e-government, increase their engagement and participation, and generate innovative solutions, as well as to promote and share innovation within the government itself. 7, support open assets, including among others, data, with provisions for data privacy and protection, a point which was made by Matthew in one of the sessions, processes and people, as well as open services which enable co-creation with citizens and private sector, a good point raised by our colleague Jeremy. 9, establish a fund to encourage innovation within and outside of the government. 10, and lastly, it's good to have a recommendation, particularly on small island developing states. So the draft recommendation goes something like this. Build a knowledge exchange platform for small island developing states where legislations, e-government strategies, and innovative practices can be shared. So I hope the draft will be useful to your small group discussions. Looking forward to discussing with you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Timon. Really, yeah, we've all heard a lot of our own ideas from our small groups and our presentations in that. Thank you. And could we have the slide of the procedures for the small group discussion? Here, okay. So it's now 11:45. We have until 1 o'clock. Lunch is at 1, yes? 1 o'clock is lunch, so we have 45 minutes, but let's take just 30 minutes for table discussion of your priorities. And these are some ways you might consider doing it at your table. First, have individuals write down their priority actions. Could you go to the next slide? And then select the most important ones. But I think what's most important is for your table to discuss the recommendations and your own priorities. So if you write down individually and then as a table, decide your two, and then we'll get every table's two and see how they relate to the recommendations, okay? So your job is to first, what are your individual priorities, your top two, and then your table's top two, and then we will share and decide what our whole group's top two recommendations are for the plenary to the UN and to member states. Okay, so let's take half an hour. You can select your own rapporteur and facilitator, somebody who hasn't done it yet, and we'll report back in 30 minutes. Any questions? Pardon? What? Yeah, do we have the slide of the 9th recommendation? That has 4 slides, so while they're working on that, you can begin. Select your note taker and your facilitator and begin to get out your individual priorities and then your table's 2 top priorities, okay? So first write individually, your top 2 priorities.
Robert, one other question. You envisage another aspect that has not been mentioned as a field in the recommendation.
Yes.
It's also applicable to comment and to propose.
Exactly. So if you have something you feel is of critical importance that is not mentioned in the 9, please add that. Yes, absolutely. Okay, thank you. Wow. Well, I see a lot of brilliance. As I walked around the room, I saw so much creativity and interaction and excitement, people facilitating, writing on the flip charts. It was thrilling, thrilling. Okay, so if we could start here, if this group could please give us your 2 top priority recommendations. And here's your...
Thanks, Rob. So our recommendation centered around collaboration. And then we divided it into like 3 sub-collaboration modalities. So first, collaborative governance and e-leadership for sustainable development. So under this, we need to secure political will and have common vision and values among all the stakeholders, ensure capacity building of public sector for a whole-of-government approach to integrated service delivery. The second bit is collaboration between the providers and the recipients of public services. So inclusive and interactive service delivery. Increase citizen usage by reducing TCV, as discussed by our colleague from Bangladesh. Reducing time, cost, and visits. And promote its crowdsourcing, and co-creation with citizens, private sector, and civil society. Then the third bit is incentives for innovation and knowledge sharing. So collaboration among innovators. So identify and incentivize innovators through gamification, funds, and awards. And particular sub-recommendation on small island developing states, promote knowledge exchange on innovation e-governance through study tours, meetups, and social media. Thank you.
got that in your
Assist
mind, their
collaboration.
It's one.
recommendations? If this group could please come to the front and report. Which group is this? Yes, sir.
1, 2, 3, we did ABC.
Thank you. I think at our table, we did have our own individual priorities, so it's not difficult to guess what mine is, right? It's very much related to SIDS. But as a group, as a table, we thought the UN platform would be an ideal platform to further motivate our leaderships in our countries. And as such, we looked at 2 different levels of motivation. One is if we could have a model, a UN-sanctioned model reference, including various artifacts that should be there before we start buying computers, right? So a model eGov framework, which could be used for capacity building as reference templates, or for just pure adaptation and implementation or experimentation at different levels of government in other parts of the world. A second is something a little more forceful. In fact, a number of our participants at the table were quite forceful on this. And since we need more motivation, our leadership needs more motivation. So a UN resolution which mandating minimum development requirements in terms of ICT. So as a country, for example, we are trying to have a minimum standard of broadband. But as a world, as a global UN, can we have a minimum standard or minimum penetration ratios that we want to achieve? Maybe probably in the 2015, agenda. So this is the kind of 2 things that we narrowed down. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this group, if you could please come forward and report. Whose is this? Okay, here he comes. Yes, sir.
Now the SIDS table has sent me again to speak again. It's no, our first priority is the SIDS one. And I don't know how many SIDS countries are in this room, but we speak for them and the rest who are not here. And my colleague before said their group was very forceful. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, ours was even more forceful. That recommendation, we tore it apart and changed it. And I apologize for the language, I'm just a mouthpiece. Small island development states. By the way, do you know that this year is the year of SIDS? Yes. You did? Yes. Well, we just found out 20 minutes ago. And I thought we should have been the first ones to know. Great job, UN. Now, seriously. We thought that, first sentence, build a knowledge exchange platform. That sounds very generic. It can mean anything. So we changed it to say, provide technical assistance, provide financial assistance, and assist 6 countries to tap into donor organizations for eGov projects. How come you guys have all gone so quiet? Second one, and the first one was by consensus. The second one, we did a democratic process. I mean, after all, we are a United Nations members. And the one that won was governance with 5 votes. So the second one is governance. All those wordings, I'm not going to bore you with, but political will, then we added government commitment after political will. And then all these other words behind it that ended in the implementation of e-governance. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your passion. And this group could report. Whose is this? Yes, sir.
The great thing is, in a very short period of time, we had a lot of unity and a diversity of contributions, and an excellent group that provided very good feedback there. The core theme I think of our group was a little bit of Elvis Presley. A little less conversation, a little more action. So basically, it's cut the fluff and get more towards practical, action-oriented elements. So, we had a few themes there. The first one is knowledge. So, the United Nations and the member states should stimulate structural, action-driven knowledge build-up and transfer across countries, regions, and entities. I mean, we have this UN benchmark now. It's a report. People publish a number. What happens then? Who are the people behind you in other organizations? And how can they learn from the findings in there? Learn from peers in other countries. So that's action-driven knowledge transfer needs to happen beyond the people represented here, but it needs to be actually stimulated. And that can be within a country, across countries, with academia, public-private cooperation and such, but really take it forward. And not just as an intention, but something that happens. And we can actually monitor that. Next year when we meet each other again, let's count how many things happened. And if you didn't do it, you go down in the ranking in 2 years' time. You need to have a disclaimer there as well. The second one is infrastructure. As this is a core element required in every, for every development that takes place, whether it's in the SIDS or in bigger countries, UN member states should drive the development of core development and uptake of the core critical infrastructure. That can be the technological parts, as in Wi-Fi or fiber and such, but also data centers and those sorts of things. Third point, openness and long-term strategy. UN and member states stimulate an open by default policy for all public sector activities embedded in a clear long-term strategy. The last point is important because sometimes countries have what's stated, a short sight, or that they change it every year and such. But no, open by default and a clear long-term strategy. And finally, user centricity and collaboration. Action-oriented user centricity needs to be at the heart of all initiatives, requiring cross-sectoral, regional, institutional collaboration as a critical requirement. Because without that collaboration, it's not going to happen. And if it's just all about talking, not about services for the user and such, then it's probably worthless. So, user centricity, forcing collaboration. Thank you.
No, okay, so we've all got to learn the Elvis Presley move. Okay, all right. And you notice this group has a new math also, 4 equals 2. The new math.
Thank you, Robertson. Unlike my colleague, I don't know to sing and I don't know to dance, but I like chocolate, so my athletic body represents my ability to this event. Thanks to my group members, we came along many different topics, but we decided to nominate 2 recommendations, out of which one is completely new. It is called strategic budgeting and planning, and we did understand that without adequate financial perspective, none of the plans will be realized. So alignment with financial constraints, also with the national programs and performance, this aspect is strongly recommended to be included. And as another one, which corresponds with the governance aspect, it's institutionalization of interministerial cooperation, like the colleague just mentioned. We do believe that so-called centers of governments may be the tool, may be the method to actually impose the collaboration, to impose something that can be also a product of monitoring and evaluation, and after all, as Jeremy just kindly mentioned, benchmarking in this perspective, because we understand that without this, many of the countries would not be actually stimulated, that is, governments would not be stimulated to endorse, to commit themselves. And after all, the credible institutions such as EU, OECD, UN may act as somebody who may contribute to the overall picture. We have followed this also as emphasizing the role of reforming an innovation body, because we would like to recommend that this aspect is strongly embedded and strengthened, as well as comprehensive compensation system and retention policy, because without adequate and skilled workers who are not adequately paid, you will not be able to sustain the system. So all these 2 recommendations actually are supported by other cross-cutting issues such as ethics and integrity. We have also mentioned anti-corruption, inclusiveness, and equity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very helpful. And now the circular group. This is watch this is important.
Thank you. In fact, I don't intend to go around in circles to get right to the point. Well, what our group, in fact, our group, the representatives come from different little islands, and we are at different stages of development. So what we thought was we were going to actually put down what we thought would be our journey, where it should start and where it should end. So we started with each country having to have a vision and the right political leadership. So once you have the vision and what you need to get to, would be probably the vision of having sustainable development. So we started by saying you need a good coordinating body, and once you have this in place, a strong coordinating body, which would actually build the strategic plan. And once you have the strategic plan in place, the strategic plan, how do we get there? There would need to be consultation with all our stakeholders within the country. That is private, public, and government. And from there, we would have to build on an action plan. To get the action plan going, which would mean actually small implementation, you need an implementation strategy. And this is where we would build into the SIDS network. Because if you don't have the capacity, we could always turn to the SIDS network or other agencies which have the experience. And once we've got the projects going, we would finally reach our goal of e-governance and sustainable development. But the whole process needs to take place around trust. And of course, the point made by our colleague who presented before me, I think is very important as well. The whole thing is based on having the finances. I would have said money, money, money. It's there all right, we need to have that as well. It's not there, but it's understood. If you don't have that, all these plans would be worth nothing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Isn't it amazing, the wisdom of each one? But we're going to come back and see what's in common and what we do next. Because we're and the last group, the next two groups. Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you very much. I speak on behalf of the learned visionary team. The first one was on the collaborative governance in the true letter and spirit. Though we talk a lot about it, but the reality on the ground is not evident of that. For example, the public-private partnership, how many percentage of the people here, leaders, are available from private sector? You know, the people who develop these technologies, Intels and Cisco's and IBM's and ERPs, you know, they are behind the whole ICT agenda. So we need thought leaders into these programs, and also behind that, no government alone can eradicate all the problems of the public and citizens. Bill Gates Foundation is one outstanding example of that. So a true sense of public-private partnership at the thought creation stage and right up to the execution and monitoring. Also, we need top-down and bottom-up. It's not always to keep looking up. You know, the example is of a pressure cooker. You know, you build so much steam, the whistle blows. So create enough, you know, mass and approach bottom-up and somewhere top-down, bottom-up approach needs. A central coordinating body, you know, the cross-government, the new category which was introduced a couple of years back, is an outstanding example where all the governments need to work. Now, this is not just a single window. You know, when we go to the departments, behind these counters, it is all fragmented. Processes are fragmented, structures are there, budgets are separate, things like that. So we need a true sense of agency which coordinates the entire effort. Second one was on the development of human and people capacities in use of ICTs and about benefits of that and conveniences and so on. Now here, if I may share with you, 4 billion people live below the poverty line, or $2, based on C.K. Prahlad's book, you know, Fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. These are the people we need to reach out. You see, government, of course, there are a lot of people, middle income and upper income, they can take care of themselves. But how about the blue collar workers, the construction workers, and the underprivileged, and so on and so forth? So if you reach out, it's an 80-20 law. 20% effort impacting 80% of the people. Other one was create an innovation fund. There's something in word we call benchmarking. This is actually stealing good ideas. This idea we stole from Dr. Adriana. About 4 years back, she spoke to me about innovation fund. So this team also fell in love with the idea. Innovation fund essentially to create the strategy around the state level and build the capacities, organization structure to execute that, and the processes of innovation. It just doesn't happen. You won't tell anyone, please innovate. There are methodologies like TRIZ, it's a Russian methodology, very well proven, where people need to be trained in these methodologies and think of the Edward D. Bono's methodologies and principles and practices. So with this, I thank you all very much. Any questions, please direct to them.
The final group, we're about, here we are.
I'm too scared to stand up to even come to here because I'm keeping everyone from lunch. So I will try to be very short and precise. We thought that the most two important recommendations to present to the esteemed members here are inclusive strategizing for innovative e-government, and that is all about addressing and prioritizing your national needs. Every country has its own national needs and we should be working according to that. And we think vertical and horizontal integration and collaboration is very important, and so is the aim of everyone should be eventually connected e-government. And the second one is participated and demand-driven e-government, and that could not will not be achieved unless all segments in society are included, especially the youth, and we should not neglect the private sector voice also. Another thing is localization. It's very important. We have countries like India, our colleague was telling us that 90% of the content is produced in English, while only 10% of the population know how to read English and understand it, and that's a very important issue to be addressed. Another thing is that delivery channels of e-services should be multi and different, of different kinds, because it needs to be addressed to whatever infrastructure you have in the different areas in your countries. Another thing, last but not least, capacity building. And the unique part of capacity building we wish to address is it should be for the political leaders, because we talk a lot about educating the mass and making sure they are digitally literate, but political leaders should be also educated on the importance of e-government and achieving it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.